I'm a leftist, so I
Well, thank you for coming. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. My brother's actually a big fan. He's up there.
So do you guys punch each other or what?
I come from a very conservative family, so you learn to get along with it, right?
So you're the black sheep? Okay.
Yeah, exactly. I actually don't disagree with most of the points that you were making, or at least a lot of them.
So why are you a liberal?
If not that. Well, we're in a post-label society, right? No, but what I would say is that I disagree with a lot of your conclusions.
Okay.
For instance, institutional racism.
Yes.
I mean, you can even go back 40, 50 years.
Then there was institutional racism. I'm talking about now.
Yeah.
And I'll freely acknowledge, anyone who doesn't acknowledge there was institutional racism
For sure.
40 or 50 years ago is an idiot, obviously.
Absolutely, absolutely. But I mean, so to then go to the other extreme and to say that there is zero racism, institutional racism or something like that, 40 or 50 years, and I mean the fight for racial equality, I think even the most conservative person wouldn't say that it ended with the repeal of Jim Crow.
No, it didn't end with the repeal of Jim Crow, obviously.
Yeah.
Look at the 70s and the 80s, for
Exactly.
sure. No, 100%.
Yeah.
But there's been, as President Obama said, there's been enormous progress. He and I disagree on the level of progress. But, but here's the question.
Yeah.
When people use it, and I said before I don't like vague terms.
Yeah.
The term institutional racism is vague. The reason I can say there was institutional racism 40 or 50 years ago is because I can name the specific institutions that were racist.
Absolutely.
So if you want to say institutional racism, I need you to tell me which institution is racist, and then we can go fight it together. The reason I object to the term is when people say institutional racism, generally, it's just an excuse to do nothing and complain. Right? People say institutional racism, that creates poverty, therefore more government. That doesn't wash for me.
And so that makes sense to me. And so what I would say in response to that is that I mean it can be tough to identify or break down exactly what's going on. I mean,
Do you see the necessity for doing so, though?
100%. I mean, I also, you're obviously a free enterprise guy. Even when you can't necessarily break down things 100%, you still sometimes, have to make a decision. It's sometimes still useful to take action.
Well, you have to identify the problem before you can take proper action.
But so if we accept that the racism problem is not 100% resolved, or something like that. I mean, even just
it's too vague a problem. So to say, I agree,
Sure, so
racism is not 100% resolved. I said there are
degrees.
individuals who are racist, but you need to. It's not a matter of degrees. It's a matter of institutions that have been completely taken off the board as racist institutions. So to take Jim Crow as an example, state governments used to force restaurants not to allow black people into white areas.
Yeah.
That's no longer the case.
Yeah.
So I can easily say now that those restaurant laws are non-discriminatory.
Sure.
That's an institution that is no longer racist. Right, and that's because that institution had a racist law, and now that racist law is gone. If you can point to somebody who's a racist, I'm happy to talk about that person and whether they should have that job.
Absolutely, yeah, that makes sense. Outside of pointing to specific people, that's the only way at this point. As long as the laws are repealed, there is no institutional racism.
You can point to specific institutions too, but I need something to fight. You can't send me out there to fight windmills.
Yeah,
I want to fight racism too, but I need something more than windmills.
If we institutional racism, I mean, if we even just expand on the definition of that, even just a tiny bit, just from specific institutions, specific laws, and such, to racism prevalent throughout our institutions.
No, because again, you need to name the institution. It's too vague. I mean, the library is not racist. Like this is a problem. If you go into a doctor and you say, "I hurt," and the doctor says, "Where?" and you say, "I hurt," doctor's going to have a real tough time coming up with exactly how to cure you.
But that's his job.
No, it would be unfair. It is not the doctor's job to tell you how you hurt. It's your job to tell the doctor where he hurts.
It's 100. So yeah, but all right. So. And I get what you're saying.
No, it's a fine conversation. The problem is it's all out there in the ether. So if it can at some level be reduced down to something we can solve, every problem has to be reduced to something you can solve. Otherwise, it's just bitching.
Absolutely, yeah. And so what I would say is then you're saying that conclusively it's unsolvable unless we concretely.
Because I don't think that it's asking too much of people. I don't think it's random for a doctor to say to you. Are you talking about your head or are you talking about your leg? Right? I think that's a perfectly reasonable question for the doctor to ask, and I wouldn't call him a bad doctor who's ignoring the problem. if you just come in and give him a problem that he can't even have a shot at diagnosing.
Yeah, but that's not a perfect analogy either.
No, it isn't a perfect analogy. It's a very rough analogy.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, well, and so, I mean, just as an example, a mute patient, someone who can't communicate their illness or their problem whatsoever.
But is the implication that the black community is mute, or that the political community here is mute? Because that's
absolutely
not
not.
true.
I'm just making it more vague, making the problem, identifying the problem, as in your analogy, more difficult.
What I'm saying is that, but I'm saying
like,
in the past it was not hard to identify the problem.
Yes.
This is the point that I'm making. Why is it so much harder to identify the problem now than it was before?
I mean, and I guess then, as it seems like, it depends on how you're looking at the
Because
problem.
things have been, the answer is because things have been mitigated, and now people struggle to actually identify the problem. So instead, they prefer to talk in vague terms, and then they can invoke government action. That's why.
And so I would say that that's not the only explanation. That isn't the only explanation.
Okay, well then
maybe there's a legitimate. Maybe it is legitimately difficult to identify.
And maybe when they legitimately give me a problem I can solve, we can get outside of our
fair
identity
enough.
politics. But otherwise, what it comes down to, and this is an unsolvable problem that divides us all, is I'm black, and I say that there's institutional racism, and I'm not going to describe to you what that means or what that encompasses, but you're just going to have to to believe me.
And
the answer is no, because we live in a common society.
I think that's an unfair characterization. These viewpoints that you're talking about.
Well, I don't think it's an unfair characterization of a lot of what the Congressional Black Caucus says, for example.
Well, all right. So, in that respect, I think that's.
And I don't mean to cut you off. I think it's been a good conversation, but I think you see where I'm coming from, which is, if you want me to be on your side, which I think I want to be on your side too, because we all want to fight the same thing here.
On your side.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. So all you have to do is give me a solvable problem instead of just putting out there a vague phrase and then expecting that we're going to come to some sort of kumbaya moment, because it ain't happening.
But at least that's a different, it's not incensed rhetoric against,
I don't think it's incensed rhetoric to say that you have to identify the problem. So thank you.
All right, thank you.